Welcome back to the channel. I'm Lena, and today I am talking house hacking. How can you basically reduce or eliminate your housing costs by house hacking? For most of us, our housing costs eat up a majority of our budget, and anything that we can do to lower that would be awesome and could really help us move forward towards our other financial goals. And I want to give you my ideas about how you could do that practically. If this is your first time on my channel, welcome. I am so glad you're here. On this channel, I like to come up with solutions about money and about things at home. So my goal is to make your life easier at home and money understandable so that you can win with your money. If this sounds like content that you need in your life, please subscribe to my channel and hit that little notification bell so that you are notified every single time I upload. Okay, house hacking, what is it? So house hacking is basically just a fancy term for figuring out how to get someone else to cover your housing costs by being clever or having some sort of arrangement at your house so you do not have to pay the lion's share of your housing costs yourself. On this channel, I have talked quite a bit about our personal house hack, but then I was thinking maybe it would be more useful if we talked about some other ways that you might be able to house hack even if you do not have the same setup as us or the same life circumstances as us. The first way that you can house hack is the most accessible for everybody because you can do it if you're renting, and that is having roommates. So technically this is a house hack because you are lowering your living expenses by having people live in the same place as you. So if you would like to live in a house and you are renting a house, if you get other people to rent out the other rooms long term and be on the lease with you, you can lower your costs. So there are definitely pros and cons to this, and I know this is more popular when you are in college or you're really young because your life starts getting more complicated after that, but it can be a very effective way to live in a nicer place while keeping your housing costs minimal. So you could do this if you were renting or if you were the owner of the place. So obvious cons would be that you don't have all the space to yourself, it's not private, and you would need to trust the people that you were living with. You will have to live with these people in the long term and get along with them, and you may get a little irritated with them at times. My next house hack idea is to room Airbnb. So this means that you are living in a house and you have an extra bedroom and you rent that bedroom out on a short-term basis on Airbnb. So my parents did this at their house, and of course there are some setup costs because the room needs to be furnished, but it's just one room, so the setup costs are not that great. If you are renting, you probably should check your lease about this or talk to your landlord to see if they are amenable to you running an Airbnb out of their house. Also, there can be a safety factor because you're letting strangers into your house. And this wasn't something I was willing to do with small children, and so renting out an existing room in our house would not work for our Airbnb venture. If you do go this route, it could be quite lucrative because short-term rentals in general are more lucrative than long-term rentals. So you could be making up for more of your housing costs in one fell swoop by just renting out one of your rooms. A little bit of a different way to go about this renting a room strategy would be to rent out to traveling nurses or doctors. Often a traveling nurse might be in town for 3 months. I feel like that's the common thing I hear about, and they need a place to stay. It's not super long term, it's not like a year, so if you don't like them, they're not going to be there forever, but also you're not changing over people all the time, so it's less in and out than it would be just renting it out on Airbnb. So that could be a version of this that's kind of in the middle between having a roommate and doing a short-term Airbnb. If this working professional that's staying at your house has strange hours, like they work the night shift, there may be some noise things to take in consideration and how loud it is at your house during the day. Perhaps they need to sleep for sure during the day. That could get a little tricksy. This next one is the most common one that I hear about, and that is buying a multi-unit property and living in one of the units and acting as the landlord to the other units. So this is what Budget Girl does, and I will link to her channel also. She bought a duplex, so 2 units. She lives in one unit and she rents out the other. So, and then that covers most of the cost of her living expenses. So you can also do this with a triplex, or you can do this with a 4-plex. There's different ways you could do this, but it's all the same principle. You're buying more than one unit and you're living in one unit while renting out the other unit. So this means you have a long-term tenant, so suddenly you become a landlord with all of the beautiful things that come along with being a landlord and all that paperwork. But a long-term tenant can be a lot of upfront work, but not necessarily as much daily work. Because if you run an Airbnb, you're probably in there a lot cleaning and stuff like that. So if you have a long-term tenant, less work per day. So I feel like this can definitely be out of reach for a lot of people because duplexes are normally more expensive than single family dwellings because you're getting 2 units, which means your down payment is bigger, your expenses are bigger. You have to prove that you have enough income to qualify to buy that unit. Before I heard of house hacks, we had already bought our first home, and if I could go back, I would go back and try to buy a duplex first instead, but we can't. And also the barrier to entry is a little bit higher because you would need to save more money for your down payment, etc., etc. Another thing to think about if you decide to house hack in a duplex is that you are living right next to your renter and you are the landlord, but they live right next to you and you see each other all the time because, you know, we see our neighbors all the time. So I feel like that could be a little awkward or strange, or I don't know. The other thing to think about is these long-term rentals are not as lucrative as doing a short-term rental, so it might not cover quite as much of your living expenses as you might expect. My final house hacking strategy is to have a unit on your property that you rent out through Airbnb. So this could look a lot of different ways. Perhaps you have a loft on the top of your garage that you could furnish and rent out. Perhaps you want to put a tiny house in your backyard and rent that out. Perhaps you want to convert the bottom half of your garage into an Airbnb. Or perhaps you have a separate apartment in your house, or you could somehow turn part of your house into a separate apartment so that they have their own private space and you have your own private space. So this is the strategy that we personally utilize, and it has worked out pretty brilliantly for us. The barrier to entry is not astronomical because we still just bought a single family home. We just gave up one of our bedrooms to be converted into this unit. In our house, one of the bedrooms and a bathroom has been converted into the Airbnb, and we did some renovations, so the only way to access that Airbnb is through an outside door, and they have no access to our house. So this solves my problem of people being inside my house or having access to my kids. Obviously, this was not free to set up because you have to furnish it, and we did renovations to make this work. And if you buy a tiny house to put on your property or you build one, that will cost money too. So there's quite a bit of setup cost that is possible, but if you can do a lot of the work yourself or be clever about your resources or shop at yard sales and such, you can really bring that cost down of starting that unit. Because it is a short-term rental, you do make a lot more money than you would with a long-term rental. So even though our unit just has 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and no kitchen, because it's a short-term rental, it does cover our mortgage most of the time. If you want to learn more about what it's like to run an Airbnb inside your house or around your house or in your yard, definitely watch my Airbnb pros and cons list to learn about the nitty-gritty of what that is like. This strategy is definitely not passive. No short-term rental is passive. So this strategy definitely involves some work, but it can be highly lucrative, and it can definitely be more accessible as the barrier to entry is not that high. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up. Let's get a conversation started in the comments. Have you ever thought about house hacking? What do you think that would look like for you? What are your questions about house hacking, and what does your house hack look like if you have one? If you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so that you get notified every time I upload a video. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye for now.